Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Josh Powers, and this is the Field Grade Leader. Thank you to all of you who are tuning in either this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are. Thanks for being a part of this program. So we started this series a few weeks ago, right as social distancing started to set in, as we all were getting away from being around each other, from being around our teammates, our coworkers, et cetera. So we started this platform, a distributed leader professional development series, to allow us to come together, to have a beer, to have a drink, to be social, to unwind just a little bit, and to continue to learn from each other. So over the past few weeks, we've had some awesome guests. We've had a lot of great conversations. There's been a few interesting moments, but tonight is a special one, and I'm very excited for our guest this evening. So, sir, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera on. Tonight, we are very lucky to have with us Lieutenant General Martin. General Martin is the Deputy Commanding General of Training and Doctrine Command in the United States Army, and he is also a somewhat new Twitter phenomenon. So we're going to learn a lot tonight about leadership applied, and about engaging. So I'm just going to explain the room ever so quickly for those that are not necessarily digital natives. So there's kind of three layers that are interacting here. So the initial layer is the webinar. See a lot of folks chatting over on the right-hand side of my screen. Some of the normal hang around folks that are out there. I see Carl Cunningham, who's been with us from the beginning. I see Sergeant Major Phil Blaisdell, who's out there as well. So thanks everybody that's joining. You know the deal. You can continue to chat, and then for those that are in the webinar, you can drop questions in the Q&A, and we'll work to get those answered a little bit later in this presentation. So the next layer out from there is Facebook Live. So same, if you're watching this on Facebook Live, thank you. You know, you're real time as well. Go ahead and hit the like and the share button to help get the word out on this one. And then if you have questions, I'll monitor that one as well, and I'll bring some of your questions and some of those themes into General Martin. And then lastly, if you're watching this recorded, same thing, just hit a share to help us get the word out, and we appreciate you being there also. So sir, good evening. How you doing today?
Good. I'm good, Josh. Thanks for having me on here today. And you know, I was kind of snickering when you said digital natives. I think I'm 2 months and a couple of days into Twitter, so I'm a digital baby.
So you might be a digital baby, but watching how you interact and how you can bring a message to people and get folks to interact, I mean, you get it. And I think that's going to be an interesting point of discussion for us here a little bit later. Sir, if you wouldn't mind, a bunch of folks that are on know you, but for those that don't, for those that are joint or even some of our multinational partners, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, Josh. Okay, so my name is Ted Martin. I've been commissioned since 1983, so I'm an old guy. Hopefully I can still keep learning new tricks. I'm an armor officer by trade. You become a general, you're still a tanker. And if you look behind me, you'll see the thing I'm most proud of. I'm a Buffalo soldier, and I had the great honor to command 1st Squadron, 10th Cavalry Regiment. I hope there's some Buffalo soldiers out there right now. Back in the initial invasion in OIF. I've had a lot of real neat and interesting jobs. Most importantly, I work with awesome people in every single command I've been to, and I'm just real happy to be here on the TRADOC team working for General Funk as we work our way through this COVID fist fight we're in right now.
Hey, awesome, sir. Appreciate it. So let's jump right in there. And I hit in the chat to see if there were any Buffalo soldiers. We've got Fred checking in. We've got Ian Palmer as well. So a couple of folks that are checking in down there in the chat, and we'll keep those posted. So right off the bat, sir, tell us just a little bit about TRADOC. It'd be interesting to hear kind of what TRADOC was, you know, what were the things you were focusing on, and then how has the current environment affected? So what is TRADOC now, and what are you guys working through now?
Okay, yeah, so very interesting. Nobody, certainly no general, I don't think, rubs the genie lamp and says, hey, let me go be the DCG at TRADOC. So I started out in TRADOC as a lieutenant in a cavalry training squadron at Fort Knox, Kentucky. Came back as a training developer and an operations officer in CAC-T as a captain. Came back again as the armor commandant, 45th Chief of Armor back in 2010. And then I had the great fortune to come back in 2018, serving first with General Steve Townsend. And then beginning in June of 18, I fell under the command of General Paul Funk. So I'll tell you what, I didn't know what I was getting into. You know, I kind of, to be honest with you, when I was coming back to TRADOC, I had just come out of command of 2nd Infantry Division. And, you know, I was kind of hoping and scrapping, keep my fingers crossed that, you know, maybe I could, you know, get back into a command. But this is where, you know, the pachinko machine of life dropped me off. And I gotta tell you, Josh, I'm not BSing you here at all. This is the most, you know, awesome assignment I could have helped, you know, could have dreamed for. Most importantly, because General Townsend and I both came into position on the exact same day, which I would not recommend. So two new guys coming back into TRADOC in the midst of the, you know, standing up of Army Futures Command. So a big chunk of TRADOC got slid off to the side. And then under General Murray, that really has, you know, accelerated our modernization, which, you know, the God of War really helped out the United States Army by doing that, I believe, because, I mean, we had just been languishing as an Army. And, you know, for all the right reasons, money had not been invested, time and effort. So, you know, Army Futures Command went that way. General Townsend came in, you know, fresh out of command of Operation Inherent Resolve, that 18th Corps. And, you know, he put that, you know, so he came in from 18th Corps. I came in from, you know, the Republic of Korea. And so we just put, you know, we put the line, our line experience into the great work TRADOC was already doing. And then it just, you know, accelerated into some really neat projects, which I'm extraordinarily proud to be a part of, which is, you know, the enhanced basic combat training, you know, OSIT, or one station unit training infantry, armor, and cavalry, moving to 22 weeks, you know, efforts like that. And then also taking the schoolhouse under the leadership of General Lundy, and now under the leadership of General Rainey, and getting the focus back on the competencies that we need for large-scale ground combat operation. And, you know, what's really spinning around in all of this, which, you know, is exciting to kind of be in this catbird seat, is the, you know, the birthing of multi-domain operations. And my neighbor, Lieutenant General Eric Wesley, you know, has been, you know, catapulting that into the future. So this is like an airplane being built on the runway with the engines already spinning. So to say it's an exciting time, you know, to be, you know, I'm not a decision maker. I'm the deputy commanding general, but I've got, it's just this awesome experience of sitting in the catbird seat and watching how the senior leadership of the Army makes these decisions. And then, you know, come January, February of 2020, we just get, you know, slammed in the flank by, you know, COVID-19. And then I'll tell you, it's been a whole new world since then. I've seen TRADOC operationalize. And I got to throw a bone to my friends in the asymmetric warfare group. One of the first things General Funk did, you know, we figured out we were going 24/7 and the speed of change was spinning. It's almost like we're back in a corps or division, you know, COIC, trying to figure out how to grapple with this. And we had, you know, watching the asymmetric warfare group come in and operationalize what is a probably 75% civilian organization here. I mean, great civilians, but 25% green suiters about. I mean, it's been a wild Mad Hatter teacup ride. Actually, it's Space Mountain, with all the lights turned out and people throwing crap at you. If you ever been on Space Mountain.
That's a good metaphor, sir. I feel that one for sure. So so all super interesting stuff, and a lot to dig in on there. What is interesting as Futures has come online as an institution, how is the relation, not how is, but what is the relationship in evolving the Army between TRADOC and Futures Command? How do you stay in sync with those, the right concepts, the right technology, et cetera, as the team moves forward?
That's a great question. And, probably the biggest danger to the Army is standing up the Futures Command and the threat that we might disconnect the centers of excellence where the combat, capabilities, development folks are married up with, the functional proponents. So, the one that's in my wheelhouse the most is, Maneuver Center of Excellence down at Fort Benning. So everything infantry and armor, you got Kevin Admiral down there, you got Dave Hodney, and then you got Gary Brito, the commanding general. And then you've got Don Sando, who's the Army Futures Command Senior Executive Service. And they gotta keep together, so we don't just walk off and develop, future concepts in a silo and develop the kit that we need without the experience of the line, which is what the TRADOC piece is. So we like to call it the TRADOC AFC handshake. The great news is that all the personalities work right now. I mean, my neighbor's Eric Wesley, and then Jim Rainey down at Combined Arms Command keeps all the COEs connected at the lowest level. So we got pretty good interconnectivity. Figuring the money out to support that, which is a bore to everybody. That's been a little bit difficult because just the way the Army manages money, I should say the Department of Defense manages money, it makes it difficult to unwind the money and get it where it's going. But we're getting there, and I think that'll work out just fine. So I've got great confidence. So Joss, here's the real thing. I hope the folks out there know. Nobody has a lock on what the future looks like. AFC, Futures Command are driving towards the future. But if we're going to wait around and have higher headquarters, because everything works its way back up through the Department of the Army staff, the Secretary of the Army, and the Chief of Staff. If we're going to wait on them, we may not get the right solution. And I honestly think that a lot of the future resides in the company grade and below realm, because they're the ones that are right now at the combat training centers getting their ass whipped, by electronic warfare, information warfare, dealing with, in a GPS denied environment, and where the near peer threats are pushing their tactics in our face. So every battle period at the National Training Center, there's a lieutenant and a platoon sergeant, a captain and a first sergeant who are pissed that they got their ass whipped, and they're sitting down and they're going, next time we need to do, this. And that's all going to translate back to their next home station training. And then they're going to start demanding capabilities. That's where, the future really resides. So I think, the higher headquarters are driving to the future, and they're pressing us. But this bottom-up refinement, somewhere out there, there's a Captain Basil Little Hart who's, coming up with a concept, and he's going to have to wait a couple of years. He or she is going to have to wait a couple of years before they get what they want. But they're going to crack that code. Sorry to go off on a diatribe like that, but that's kind of one of the things that's on my mind frequently.
No, sir, that's great stuff. And I'd say a bunch of people in the audience have been there, dead on the objective. Most recently for me as a brigade S3 and as a battalion S3, dead in the Whale Gap and a number of other places. What I'd be interested to hear, what are the feedback loops? Like you mentioned, that the young lieutenant or sergeant first class that has an innovative solution to an EW threat or whatever it is that they're looking at there at NTC or JRTC, what are the feedback loops to the institutional Army to help bring those best practices and to tie it into procurement and so on?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm not an expert on how this is going on, but I mean, I'll just give you kind of the vantage of what I'm seeing and what I've learned in the last like 2.5 months. So we've got the stodgy, I shouldn't say that. We've got the, we've got the Center for Army Lessons Learned. So there's a methodical approach to getting lessons learned, and they brought their, the process into the 21st century, actually under a guy named Colonel retired Mike Papel. When he was the call director, he started getting the lessons and the information back out and packaged it so it was made for lieutenants, captains, platoon sergeants, first sergeants, and so there's that little feedback loop, but we're not seeing a lot of activity in it. And then we've got the senior leaders that are like the Forces Command, CG General Garrett is going out to the NTC and to JRTC, and then General Cavolia is staying connected to what's going on in at Hohenfels with the training center there. And you'd be surprised, having been the COG in the CG out at NTC a couple of years ago, there's some pretty brutal, frank discussion on what's working and what's not working, and what problems have yet to be solved. And I would say that it was probably in 2013 that we made that big leap into large-scale ground combat operations rotations, with a few exceptions. But the division commanders and the ForceCom commander, the TRADOC commander, they're going down and they're observing firsthand what's going on. And I can't speak because I haven't seen General Garrett in operation, but when General Abrams and the other commanders, I know for a fact the division commanders, they spend a lot of time observing after action reviews, which I think are probably the most, they're, pardon me, but they're ass whipping when they're going on. And I've been dragged across the coals. I can show you some 3rd-degree burns, but also, that's where you really, peel back the onion and you find out, hey, we got to figure out how to do this. We got to figure out how to do this. And we didn't prepare properly, and you see the changes going on. And commanding generals are watching that. You never know when, because they can toggle between after action reviews. And so I think we've got a lot going on. I'm kind of concerned. I think we had one combat training center at each of the 2 CONUS locations, for the right reasons, shut down. But when we get those back up and running, that's really the vehicle, I believe, for driving change and requirements in the Army.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Appreciate the insight on that. And you started to allude to this a little bit when you talked about TRADOC and just now about some shift to some of the scheduling. Be interested to hear from a COVID perspective, kind of a black swan, if you will, coming out of the winter. What has changed in your daily operations in TRADOC? How have your operations adapted so that you can continue mission? I'd imagine what you talked about before, the relationship between TRADOC and Army Futures Command. I can envision it. There's conferences and so on, and the good majority of that is not occurring. So how have you your battle rhythm, your team's battle rhythm, how has that adapted to the current environment?
Hey, that's a great question. So I saw the cuts from General Holmes. General Holmes is right down the road at Langley, Joint Base Langley, Eustis. They've got the runway, we've got the swamp. So I saw General Holmes, he did it from his home. And my folks said, hey, do you want to do this from your home? Unfortunately, the garrison commander here, they declared a public health emergency. We're in HPCon Charlie. So I can't have my team come into my house and, you know, set up. So we had to come here. So, I mean, the reason I gave you that little vignette is I would tell you that everything changed, and it didn't change over the period of 3 weeks. You know, once we saw what happened to Korea, we started, you know, so when the historians get this battle, this is more of a campaign. When they get this campaign, you know, with the COVID fight, we watched it slam into Korea. And, you know, being a veteran of the Rock myself, my first thoughts were, hey, you know, they have a lot of respiratory problems over there because of all the pollution that comes down what's called the Siberian Express out of China. And, you know, if anybody out there is concerned about the environment, probably the first place you need to look with a jaundiced eye is what the filth that comes down the peninsula in Korea. So, you know, I didn't really, I thought, hey, this is just something tied to that. And then we saw it kind of plow into Germany. And then we started batting down the hatches, and everything changed. And, for the folks that might not know, the Department of the Army had stood up a crisis action team. I think they're on their 90th day. So backtrack 90 days or thereabouts is when the Army, came online. We started receiving reports. It's just like, when the first echelon slams into Korea, we're 2 echelons back. And, did it hit Washington? I mean, we started taking stock and moving pretty quick to change everything that we did. The funny thing is, on our updates, we used to put the 2 up there to brief, and after about a day, I don't know, I'm looking at my own aid. I said, after a day, we said, hey, push him out of the way, and let's get the TRADOC surgeon up there. And then we started listening to, there's a guy named Colonel Kim, Dr. Kim. He's up in DA's, the Army's infectious disease guy. We were personally on the phone with him. I can't remember how many days before that happened, but we did not understand the enemy. But imagine you're fighting an enemy that you can't see, you can't hear. He fights at night. He fights all weather. And then you look at your training base, and you look at where we've got like 1,400 recruiting stations, 65 MEPS, military entrance processing stations, and then we've got 4 Army combat or Army training centers. Fort Jackson's the biggest, Fort Benning, Fort Leonard Wood, and then Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And all of a sudden, they became our Schwerpunkt. We had to defend those. And then, I mean, we basically went clean sheet on everything. And, I'm telling you, so instead of having a cavalry scout up there telling you where the enemy is, we had a doc telling us this is where it is. So I feel really fortunate, that General Funk had been in position, how many months? He'd been out to all the combat training center, the Army training centers. And then all of our CGs down there had been in position. And most importantly, a guy named General Beagle, Brigadier General Beagle at Army at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I'll be honest with you, Fort Jackson is probably not on anybody's hit list, to be, hey, I want to go do my key and developmental assignment there. But holy Lord, the majors, the drill sergeants, the captains, first sergeants, that the whole echelon of command that was there, they to me are probably the most agile and adaptive and able to handle culture change. I mean, imagine, if you will, basic training. So basic training is run by Army Regulation 350-6. It tells you exactly what you will do every single day and how you will deliver training and what will be done. We had to throw that in the garbage, and they sat down in what I call a clean sheet counterattack to quickly establish a bubble without stopping training. And I'm going to keep saying the name General Beagle again because I think you're going to see it again. You're probably not going to see him in TRADOC. You're going to see him coming out, you know, and you're gonna say, hey, where'd this guy come from? Why is he commanding? You know, he's an infantry guy. He probably dreams about commanding the 82nd, but you know, maybe he'll get lucky and command the 1st Armored Division, a tank unit, or the 1st Cav. I mean, try to get a drill sergeant to change what they're doing. And I'll give you just a classic example. The surgeon, the commanding general, and the Army training, the commander's Center for Initial Military Training. So that's Major General Hibbard and Command Sergeant Major Mitchell. They all sat down in like a mundane event, like getting a haircut. I mean, it was a wrestling match, but when's a safe way to do it? We're fighting on a COVID battlefield. When can we safely do this? Right now, until we get a vaccine or we can successfully eliminate any threat of COVID, we're not cutting hair in basic combat training till day 15. And I just got back from Fort Benning, Georgia. And if you don't think it's a culture shock for a drill sergeant to look at Fluffy Top wearing a mask, but they took it in stride. And I said that I'm just giving you one example. The entire program of instruction has been flipped on its head. And these men and women, and I'm really throwing it on to the non-commissioned officers here, in basic combat training, and even in AIT, because we have the 128th Aviation Brigade here. I mean, within a couple of days, they figured out how to use face shields, masks, what parts of the helicopters they had to clean, what kind of assessment they had to do, and they've been driving on. And it just kind of gives you a flavor of what's going on. But I'm telling you, we stopped intaking for 2 weeks, but we have never stopped training. 100% of TRADOC is out there swinging at the pinata, and it's. It hasn't gone without its glitches, and that's the interesting thing about Twitter. So I've been on Facebook basically, to stay in touch with my family, which is all over the world. But when I came into Twitter, it's on, like, I'm a cab guy, and it's like I've been fighting without a radio. So I clicked on the radio, and all of a sudden, there's a lot of stuff on there, but there's a lot of enemy contact. Like, hey, flash to bang on something going wrong is about, depending on when you can get on Twitter, it could be 10 minutes, where it might take a week, for something to work its way up, all the way to TRADOC headquarters. So we've been able to, identify a problem, engage to confirm or deny, and then we got really good, commanders at echelon they're taking action and running with it. So our decision loop is, I can't even tell you how much faster it is than it was. Maybe it's a conglomeration of COVID has pushed us onto it, and then we've seen the value of it, so we're exploiting it.
Yes, sir. So let's follow on that one for a minute, because that's there's a ton of people on here who've seen you come on to Twitter and felt your energy there. So I'm not asking for a policy type of an answer to this. This is just a perspective. But what do you think the role of social media is for leaders in the military?
Well, I'm still really an amateur, and to be honest with you, I feel kind of bad that I just I ignored it, because honestly, at some of the developmental courses I've been to, they told us, hey, don't get onto social media. I mean, so like I've been a general since 2011. So early on in the infancy of all this stuff, I was told not to get on it. Now, when I was in Korea, I got a Twitter account, but it was only because I was in Korea, and there's a pretty good chance I could find out I was getting new orders over Twitter, or at least have a heads up, like a warno. But I didn't engage in it. So what's the role? I think it's one of the tools in the toolkit. But what I might add, so I do stay connected. My son is a captain, and my daughter-in-law, who's my daughter, she's awesome. She's a second lieutenant, and so I've heard the problems with leadership by digital means, texting orders, kind of abuse, and that side it was abuse. On the other side, I would say it's a communication tool. Most of the time, you don't want to circumvent the chain of command, because we have to exercise the chain of command so we can get good at it. And we can do it on the battlefield. But it is a good way if you're gonna, if things are changing rapidly, and I've been around a while, so I know that on Monday we're going to shoot gunnery on Wednesday, and on Tuesday now we're on gate guard, and on Wednesday now we're going to send 50 soldiers up to division to do whatever. I mean, so I know that it's a good tool to get information out like that. But as a leader, what I've seen is I kind of got a pulse of what's going on, and I kind of wish I had this as a squadron and a brigade commander. I don't know how much time I could have devoted to it, but I could have had somebody watching it and then come up to me and say, "Hey, so I think we got a problem," or the message isn't getting out, or there's there's confusion, and I think it can cut through confusion.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. And it allows you to show, and people are mentioning it down in the comments, just there's somewhere up there, just be yourself. It allows you to show a genuine aspect of you and who you are that opens up to the community and to the team as well. But there's also, there's also this other layer to it. And I'm going to open up some questions here, starting with Megan Starr. Let's see if we can get Megan on the net. And Megan has a question that is tied into social media, the media environment in regards to the Teddy Roosevelt. So Megan, are you able to talk?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sir, so my question was basically to get your response. We saw a lot on social media, a lot of different opinions out there. So one, from a geo level perspective, what are your thoughts on the incident and what happened? And two, how do you see social media kind of shaping the narrative on that? And what are the lessons learned for higher level leaders, seeing how social media kind of took control of what the narrative was?
Sure. Yeah. Hey, there's a lot of landmines in that question, so I'll be cautious. First thing I'd say is, I've got the same emotions that everybody else is out there. So I'm an extraordinarily lengthy period of my command, my time as an officer. So I'm coming up on 37 years. But almost the last 10 years before I became the DCG, I was in command. And then one of my role models was a guy named General Raymond Odierno. I served him as his Div Cab squadron commander in his G3. So what I learned from him was go with the commander. When in doubt, back the commander. So my first instincts when I saw this was, and I have been on a couple of aircraft carriers. I grew up in right outside of Mayport, Florida. My first instinct was, if that commander wrote a note, there was, echelons of problems. The first thing I did was I went up and looked his bio. Now, if you took the time to look up Captain Crozier, I believe is his name, his bio. He started out as a helicopter pilot. First, he came from Naval Academy. That doesn't really matter. Source of commission doesn't get that out of your wheelhouse. First off, he started out as a helicopter pilot. Then he went and somehow he went, worked his way into fixed wing, became an F-18 pilot. So here's a cat that's taken off and landed on an aircraft carrier, day, night, bad weather, flying combat missions. He commanded one of those squadrons, which probably aged him by 10 or 15 years. Then he commanded a ship. He went to nuke school. Then I believe he was a prospective commanding officer on the Teddy Roosevelt, and then he commanded it. So when I looked at his, background, I kind of stroked my chin, and again, my gut was telling me, this guy is not an amateur. So, when all the dust settles, it will be interesting to find out what really happened. But I think the truth will come out, and it'll be very interesting. I don't know if I answered your question, but that's just how I was looking at it. And it was a big so I come from a military family. All my brothers were in the Army, so this was a big topic of discussion. We all had differing opinions, by the way.
That was great. Thank you, sir.
All right, sir. So next up, we're going to go over to Ryan Woodcraft, and his question is back kind of over towards the COVID discussion. Ryan, go ahead.
Hey, sir. So with the current COVID environment, a lot of folks have made a lot of changes, from social distancing to things that have impacted training and operations and testing. From a TRADOC perspective, really looking at training and doctrine, either for IET or PME, what are some things that you've seen that have been put in place that may become part of the new normal as we move forward? Distributed learning, distance learning, reception and integration type things.
Okay, yeah. Hey, they actually got a lot on that. So the first thing is I think it was Friday, I went to the military treatment facility here, and there's testing kits that we got at our TRADOC installations. Well, actually we have 3. One's called a BioFire. We just got those. And then another one is called a Gen Expert. They got a Gen Expert 4, a Gen Expert 16, and we got those. And then both of those required training. So in order to test somebody, you got to be trained certified. And then you got to have these little packets. So, you hear it on TV all the time. I actually got to see it. And here's just a touch point for you. So a 68 whiskey is going to get, you're going to come in and you're going to get screened. If you present, they're going to do this test on you, and they got to jam. That's not the right word, but they got to stick something in your left nostril, twirl it 5 times in the back of your throat, pull it out, put it in your right nostril, do it 5 times, and they put it in a little vial, and then it takes about 30 minutes to get it inside to the 68 kilos, which is a lab technician. Both of these are trained at Fort Sam Houston by TRADOC, and it's dangerous. Did you know that the 68 kilo, when they take that one sample, in order to decontaminate it and put it in the system, it goes through 11 pair of gloves? Unbelievable. And then they test it, takes about an hour. The reason I tell you all that is early on, we had to, we have to create a bubble in IET. We will have to create a sterile bubble until such time as we get a vaccine. And that might be a year, it might be 6 months, I don't know, but I know that they're throwing a huge effort against it. So what we had to do is we got to take soldiers from their hometown and get them to a MEPS. So we call it screen, guard, and cover for all my cavalry friends out there. 14 days out from coming in the Army, and I put this in some tweets. 14 days out, we talk to the new recruits and tell them self-quarantine. We check on them. Then at 96, 72, 48, 24, we're checking them. Hey, do you feel okay? Do you have, are you doing all right? And then the recruiter takes them to the MEPS. The MEPS screens them again, puts them in a mask. And if they're, they need testing, they get it there, but that means they're not going to ship. And then they ship to the to the Army Training Center. So once they get to the Army Training Center, we've modified what was called red, white, and blue, the phases of basic combat training, into yellow, red, white, and blue. And all training, first 14 days are in control monitoring. And anybody they get checked every single day. We still don't have enough test capability to do 100%. We're getting there, but it takes a long time. And remember, I said one sample, 11 gloves, 30 minutes. And that's to get it into a BioFire or to get it into a Gen Expert 14, or they got this super machine. I think it's called a Panther. We have those at, like, where there's a full up Army hospital, like Dwight D. Eisenhower down at Fort Gordon. So that's just the basic combat training. What they're doing for Ranger School, very interesting. This Ranger class that's intaken on Sunday, they had to quarantine, for those of you who've been at Fort Benning, at Olson Hall, which is the old quadrangle. And then they just got screened using some of the new kit that the lethality cross-functional team is doing. But they've gone 14 days with no symptoms, so they can progress into Ranger School. Same things happen into Airborne School. We just had a 100% enlisted airborne class, I think like the first time in history, because they went straight from the training base into, they were in the bubble and they went right in. Now, here's the really cool thing that's going on. Once you graduate from basic, we keep you in a bubble and we safe transport you to AIT, Advanced Individual Training. So just yesterday, I think we moved about 250, 300 people, planes, trains, and automobiles. We actually don't use trains, but we're using gray tails, contract aircraft, but there's no civilians on there. The only people who get on are people that are clean and clear, or they take buses. We can go 600 miles in a bus, with a Jimmy Dean. But we keep them in the bubble. Now, here's the funny thing. This is really interesting. And this kind of wraps back into how Twitter has enlightened me. So a 19 kilo tanker, the most important MOS in the Army, besides 19 Delta, they're kind of 50-50. Cavalry Scouts graduated. And then I guess some young, brand new private down in 181 Armor texted me and said, "Sir, when am I going to get out of here?" Direct message. And I was like, "I don't know. We'll find out." Come to find out, he was going to move in 4 days. I can't tell somebody when they're going to move. I can just say, "Hey, you're going to move real soon." So he was going to Fort Riley, Kansas. So they got delayed because of weather, and then they took a commercial flight. This young man happened to be going to 2nd Battalion, 34th Armor, the Dreadnoughts. And when he got up there, he actually sent me pictures back, of going through screening, getting on the airplane, social distancing. I mean, just all the right things, And then he got there and he said, "Hey, sir, I got here. Thanks." And I said, "Great, man. I can't, wait, figure out what company you're in." And he goes, "Well, they put us in quarantine." So that came as a shock to me because we kept them in the bubble. And, from my perspective, there was no need to keep them in quarantine. So I engaged both General Brito and my counterpart at Forces Command, General Quintus. And I said, "Hey, why are you guys putting them in quarantine?" So what came back to us, and again, I'm coming back to what circling back to, I think, the first question, which is you got to go with what the commander on the ground wants to do. The commander on the ground knows that, if there is a contaminant, if we got a vector in the system, that it will show in, 5 days. So he went to he elected to do a 7-day quarantine. And I can't fault him on that. I said, I just came from being a division commander in Korea. I trust TRADOC, but it's not going to hurt to be a patient warrior on this and take those 5 days. So this young soldier is going into quarantine. Guess where he's going into quarantine? Camp Funston. And if you go back in history, you find that they were able to trace the very first 1918 flu pandemic. Soldier number 1 was at Camp Funston. And I kind of sat back and I said, "Sweet baby Jesus, look at this. If this isn't ironic." I hope that answered your question. I'm sorry I droned on for so long.
Yes, sir. And I think this is new territory for everybody. So finding some of those best practices and TTPs to implement into the new normal, because I think what we knew as normal in November may not fully come back into fruition. So just kind of understand.
Learning, and not the distance learning I grew up with, which honestly was crap. You know, where you get a set of books in the mail. It just was not quality education. And even now, it's, you know, unless there's interaction with a real instructor, you know, some of the ways that we're, you know, have just started doing Command and General Staff College and some of the other courses, it wouldn't be good. But we're looking hard right now at what can we bring into top quality distance learning. And so don't get worried right off the bat, because every time I hear distance learning, I hear, you know, this is what I do. But I've changed it to this, and here's why. Because what we want to do is like take a 22-week course and see what part of that can we actually put in top quality distance learning with a, you know, interactive small group. That's one part of it. And then the concept that I believe the Chief of Staff of the Army is this close to, you know, I mean, he's very interested in it. And that is that at some point, you know, let's say you're going to go to Captain's Career Course, or you're going to go to ALC, you know, so officers or NCOs, that at some point you would enter a distance learning mode. And that mode would include pulling off your patch and putting on a new patch, but at your home station, you know. And so you may spend 4 weeks in dedicated, you know, I would call it compensated distance learning, but not a bunch of books. You know, it would be interactive with Blackboard and all the other tools that they're using, and, you know, whatever Zoom type, you know, so we could, what I call Hollywood Squares it and do, you know, stuff. Now, remember, I said I used as an example a 22-week course. So we're going to take 4 weeks and make it distance learning, but we're going to take the 22 weeks and maybe we'll only shrink it to 20. So it would actually be a 26-week course if it had the front end quality distance learning module. And it will take us a while to get there, but that, you know, that is what we're trying to do. So next time when, you know, wave 2 hits of COVID, and we're not going to be ready by November, I can tell you that right now, October, November, whenever it comes, we're not going to be ready. And who's to say this is the last pandemic that we get hit with? But, you know, fool me once, we are not going to get caught with our pants down again. So that's kind of where, you know, the things that TRADEC is looking at. And there is a lot of intellectual energy right now going in that. I just got back from Fort Benning, and I looked at the 91 Mike course, which is Bradley Mechanic Advanced Leader course, and that's exactly what they were doing. You know, they were nugging away on it. But it will not replace, you know, hands-on, first-person, performance-oriented small group instruction. It won't. I can tell you that right now. Sorry if I've thrown.
No, thank you, sir. And I don't want to take up everybody else's time, because I see a bunch of awesome questions in the chat box there. I've learned a lot about distributed and distance learning over the past couple of years with the ADL initiative out of the OSD and Dr. Schatz. So it's something that even at my level, either being from joint staff or from testing, that how do we get the same training value, but without having people in place? And I think this COVID environment presents an awesome opportunity, hence my original question. Thank you very much for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Anytime, thanks.
All right, sir. So I'm going to scroll through a couple on Facebook Live that we've got some questions as well. So we've had in the ballpark of about 100 people watching over on that side. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, let's do an experiment on the Facebook algorithm. So everybody that's watching, that's 84 right now, hit like and then tag one singular human being who should be watching this as well. And let's see how much we can get this up in the world. So question from Adam Eaton is what bourbon or whiskey are you drinking right now?
You know what? I got talked to by Becky. I'll just call her Becky's a call sign.
This was not intended to be a trick question. That's a good one though, sir.
So I prefer, you know, I like energy drinks. I don't, you know, just at lunchtime. And so I got, you know, I learned a couple of lessons with energy drinks, and met some new friends at the Pentagon. I'm ambidextrous when it comes, but I'll just show you, I'm a bourbon guy and I'm not a snob. So tonight I just selected one off the shelf that had a screw top so I wouldn't spill it on my helmet bag. Not that my helmet bag hasn't had bourbon spilled in it before. Not on duty.
Of course not on duty. Not intended to be a trick question. All right, sir. So next up, I've got Ian Palmer, and I've just given him talking privileges. Is this the Ian Palmer by chance?
I don't know what that means necessarily, but this is an Ian Palmer for sure. Sir, hey, thanks for taking time to talk to us tonight. You covered a lot of what I was interested in the last couple questions, really, in terms of what are the impacts to PME, and really there's got to be a backlog in terms of sending soldiers to the basic combat training, which it seems like they're starting to get through now. But, you know, the triple Cs, the CGSC, the pre-command courses, all of those, how far out do you see that backlog enduring, and is there a long-term plan to overcome it? And that's related to the other part of my question, which is, you know, some of the short-term changes you've had to make across all aspects of TRADOC. How much of that do you see sustaining for the long term?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Again, it's right in my, it's right into what we do. So let's talk. Here's the 600-pound gorilla in the room. I'm pretty sure everybody back there who's around back in the day knows this. The big problem that lurks out there is, will we have to go to stop loss? Because here's the deal. We're going to hold in strength because in strength is a requirement for combat readiness. 58 brigade combat teams of all types, all of the functional brigades, everything else, they got to be manned at the percentages from the Army manning guidance. So the number one problem we have to solve is we have to reach in strength with enlisted accessions. And right now, I can honestly tell you that it looks good for us. We are expanding our capability in the basic. We've built 2 logistics support areas, one at Fort Benning and then one at Fort Lee, Virginia, because those are 2 of the major hubs. And we've got plans to bring the other Army training centers, Fort Jackson and the like, up if we need them to. The recruiters are almost 100% virtual right now, and they've got something called the soft contract. So there's these 2 heroes out there that you're not going to ever hear about. One of them is named Major General Frank Muth. He's an aviator, and he's the CG of Recruiting Command. And then there's this absolute superstar, Command Sergeant Major Tabitha Gavia, who's the Command Sergeant Major down there. And those combined with the recruiters that probably have the most difficult job in the Army are continuing to, make contact and do soft contracts with soldiers. So I think that part of the pipeline looks good right now, but there is a bit of risk to it. And then the second piece is our capability to push those soldiers into the training base. Right now, under General Funk's direction and Command Sergeant Major Gooden, the ATCs, Army Training Centers, have done what they need to set the conditions. That's why we needed that 2-week pause that you may have been tracking. Now, moving on to officer sessions. So I had the opportunity to actually watch a captain's career course, distance learning. It was okay. The technology is not there to support it. They're doing the best that they can. I think they're looking, well, I know they're looking in this case at M-Triple Maneuver Captain's Career Course, Infantry Armor, a few other associated branches at, going A day, B day, where they are able to do social distancing in the classroom. But, those are pretty packed classrooms now. That played itself out all over both enlisted, non-commissioned officer and officer training. So are we ever going to go back to, 40 people on a 40 PAX bus? Not until we get you in the bubble. I think one of the things you might see is you might, we're working on this. You might see all the captains, come into TDY mode and come in 14 days early. That's why, I kind of gave that vignette earlier on. If we can get the course down to what is acceptable for TDY, you may come TDY 14 days early. That's what they're doing for flight school. That's what they're doing for many of the courses we've been able to jumpstart. Go through your 14-day, control monitoring, and then we can go back to near normal. But we still want to, have the masks. Those masks are just not coming into the system. So really, the Army is moving pretty quick to get to what I would call steady state. But we really, we're still determining what right looks like. And to be honest, the deciders are really waiting on a little bit more information, a little bit more testing capability, which we don't have yet, but we are getting there fast. I actually believe, after watching global updates every day, that the Army is ahead of everybody. I hope that answers your question.
Sure, it does. Thank you. And one quick follow-up Josh has allowed me, and that's looking at it from a FORSCOM to TRADOC relationship perspective. My sense from talking to folks that are in Brigade BCT Command right now is that everyone's dealing with this a little bit differently. Some of that's understandable because it's different environments and different challenges. But is there a TRADOC role in gathering lessons learned on how to train while in this environment that's getting pushed back out to the force, or is that being done from call, like a normal, lessons learned gathering mechanism?
Actually, I can't remember. So that's a great question. I can't remember which Frago it was, but we've already been directed to capture lessons learned, and so that's being done at Echelon. So the thing I learned about TRADOC is, I like to say, sun never sets on TRADOC, because we're at over 1,400 different locations. So we've got everything from first handshake out there, and that includes Europe, Asia, Japan, Hawaii. And then we've got all of the 37 different schools that we have. So yeah, they're all facing different dilemmas, and they're all coming back to us with recommendations. And, so for all the veterans out there, you kind of hope that when you grow up, you're in a, mission command environment where you're given enough information, you're given a target, and then you're given some leeway. So even in TRADOC installations, like for example, haircuts, again, it's an easy example. Some of the different locations have been able to mitigate, that, and they put controls in place. Others, the commander decided that it was not safe enough given the conditions that they had. So there's differences. It's not a one size fits all. There's no cookie cutter solution to anything. And I think Forces Command is dealing with the same thing. I put myself in the position of Korea. It's the first thing I thought of. First off, I've got a niece over there who's a captain that just took command of a military police company. And man, I was worried, but I think what you're going to find here is, and if you watch 60 Minutes tomorrow night, you're probably going to hear General O'Shaughnessy say, "We lost the first battle." And, he's speaking from the perspective of the terrible impact this has had on our nation. But I would tell you, my position is that unlike, Lexington, unlike the first Battle of Bull Run, unlike Kasserine Pass, unlike, the very first battles almost every time the U.S. Army has been hit, the first battle in this fight, we won an astounding victory in Korea under the leadership of, I say two people because I just don't happen to know who the sergeant major is, but the command team at USFK under General Abrams, and the 8th Army Command Team under General Bills. And I'm sorry, I don't know the command sergeant majors, but those four folks were able to quickly identify, this onslaught and throw up what at first was a hasty defense, and then what turned into a strong point that, don't quote me on the numbers, but they are, if you've been to Korea and you saw what, unfortunately happened to the Republic of Korea, they broke the code. And the first thing they did was they shared it with Europe. And then, you know, General Cloutier, his sergeant major at the Cinza and the other, you know, enclaves in Italy, they threw up the same defense. And the first thing General Funk did when he came in, this thing hit, it hit Washington. He goes, hey, see if you can get USFK, U.S. Forces Korea, to do a BTC. And then we came in one night, and General Abrams and his team, and General Bills, and again, the most important guy in the room was the surgeon. Sat down and just methodically went through what this enemy looks like, how they fight, what was successful, and the links they went to. And like, again, when you watch, if you happen to watch 60 Minutes, yes, the terrible toll that America has taken. I think it's upwards of 45,000, men and women that have, perished in this. The Army, the Army's got it right. Now, I'm not allowed to tell you what the figures are for training and doctrine command, but when the history book is written, we're going to be sitting there with our thumbs up. We lament every casualty, but when the enemy comes, pouring over the parapets, and you're able to knock 99% of them down, and your flag is still there at the end of